First, it's legal and a drug used regularly by tens of thousands of people in London, but there's a good chance you've never heard of it. Khat, or Mira, is popular in East African communities. About £15 million worth is imported through the capital each year. But from Tuesday, chewing the bitter leaves of the plant becomes illegal. As one of the last legal shipments of Khat arrived in Southall, Ria Chatterjee went to find out what impact the ban will have on London's East African communities.
This week's trade is next week's drug deal. By law, Khat will be a Class C substance. But here, that's up for interpretation. Are you going to try and get Khat from somewhere else, keep selling it somehow?
Yes, no, of course. We used to sell it, but from now on we're going to stop.
The way crack and cocaine comes to this country, we'll do everything to bring it here.
You're going to do everything you can?
Yeah.
Even if it's illegal?
We are addicted to it. We ain't going to stop.
They've been taking deliveries at this warehouse 4 times a week for the last 26 years. Sunday will be the last time. People here are angry and wondering what will happen next. Many say their livelihoods will topple.
Now I have to go back job center. The last 10 years I have been working here. I do delivery.
Stop chewing, please. The children have problem. Everything no good here.
Not everyone is against the ban.
Stop chewing. Stop.
That's Abukar Awale's message too, a Somali TV presenter who says he was addicted.
My concern is our mothers who are suffering. My concern is young people who lost their role models and their daddies. Hear it from the horse's mouth. Someone who's been addicted from 7 years, who nearly lost his health and well-being. It's a drug. I think Theresa May was spot on to protect the most vulnerable part of society. I think it's a very brave decision.
Is Khat medically harmful? Official research states it's widely perceived to be a food, not a drug. That there's no strong evidence to show any adverse medical effects.
It's a segregation law which tries to criminalize a certain community in this country, especially people from East Africa. I don't know whether they are going to turn to hard drugs or drinking, but all what I know is that they will have to find an alternative from Khat.
Some insist these leaves are equal to nothing more than a strong cup of coffee. And at these Khat cafes, they gather to chew as if they're sharing nothing more than that. From next week, it's drug talk, supply and possession, fines and warnings. £6 for a bunch, but an even costlier risk of arrest. Ria Chatterjee, ITV News.
Well, earlier I was joined in the studio by the MP Mark Lancaster, Conservative MP who has campaigned for a ban on Khat, and Professor David Nutt, a professor at Imperial College London who used to sit on the group of scientists that advises a government on drugs. I began by asking Mr Lancaster what impact he thinks the legislation will have.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm confident in my constituency where the drive to ban Khat has come from the community itself. This is not government imposing its will on a minority community. This is government responding to a request from a minority community to ban this drug because of the very real impact it's having on social cohesion within those communities.
But if a lot of people are saying that they're still going to continue using it, then how do you enforce this law?
Well, I think it's going to be enforced in a very similar way that we treat cannabis at the moment. I think the enforcement side of this is very important. I'm going to a meeting tomorrow night in my own constituency where we'll be discussing it with the community. Initially it will be a warning, and then potentially if people do insist on carrying on using, there will be a fine before moving on from that. But I think there will be a very soft, gentle approach as we start this enforcement.
Professor David Nutt, yes. Now you oppose this ban. Why?
Well, for a number of reasons. I mean, the first is that we haven't tried other ways of reducing the harms of Khat. In fact, the government's own advisory council said that there was no need to criminalise users at present because we haven't tried other approaches. But more than that, we know that Khat is a relatively harmless drug. And what we don't want is for people to move from Khat to more harmful drugs. And the history of banning drugs is littered with examples of perverse consequences of people actually ending up worse off because they move to harder drugs.
You say it's relatively harmless
Yes,
as a
that's
drug,
right.
and we've heard from people, we've spoken to people who said it's incredibly addictive, and
Well,
in
it's
fact
not.
it's tearing families
Well,
apart.
people are engaging in a lot of cat-related behaviour because they've got nothing else to do, but as soon as they get jobs, they stop using cat. So cat is one of the least addictive drugs we have.
Do you think it can make the situation worse in London by bringing in a
undoubtedly.
ban?
No, it depends very much on how they police it, but if they police it in a heavy-handed way, they police cannabis, there will be an enormous amount of disruption. It will cause more damage to communities and to families, because once you start giving Somali men criminal records, they will have no option but to go into crime to support their families. And that is a really great danger of this whole approach.
Mark Lancaster, what about this feeling within the East African community, the Somali community, that they're being unfairly targeted, particularly saying that, you know, the import, the sale of cat is actually linked to terrorism in some way?
Well, let's be clear, I couldn't disagree more. This is the government responding to the needs and calls from minority communities, certainly not victimising them. The government is not banning cat solely because of the health implications on the users of cat. I mean, I've had women in my surgery in tears, sobbing, because this drug has been tearing their families apart. I think it'd be wholly irresponsible of government not to react and not to respond. It's also being banned simply because we are now completely out of step with the whole of Northern Europe. And there is a potential that we'll end up being a drug smuggling hub for the rest of Europe. So it's not just about health grounds. We need to look at the wider impact that this drug will have.
OK, Mark Lancaster. Professor David Nutt, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Speakers